A nigga like me, man, I love the game. I love the hustle, man. I be feeling like one of them ball-playing niggas, you know? Like Bird or Magic or something. Yeah, you know, a nigga got dough. A nigga could leave the league. But if I leave, the fans still gonna love me, man? I get love out here in Harlem, man. I done sold coke on these streets, man. Hash, weed, heroin. As long as niggas is feeling it, a nigga like me can hustle it. That's my gift in life, eh? You know? What? The fuck you laughing at, B?
You, man. Funny, man. You a hustling motherfucker, man. For real, baby. You fucking killing me, man.
Well, you know me, baby.
Okay, I'm back again. Yeah, there's a correlation between wealth and intelligence. We have to acknowledge this and not ignore this fact. As much as I have a disdain for the bell curve as a book, it does point out certain glaring facts about us as a people. For us we have to be truthful with where we are. We have to be truthful with who we are, and then we can start moving forward. But to ignore that fact would just be, having rose-colored glasses on. You have to be factual with your situation. I mean, without wealth, there are a few exceptions to the rules. Athletes, entertainers. For the most part, the most successful people tend to be the most intelligent people. To ignore this fact is, quite frankly, disingenuous.
That is what the book is about. The subtitle of the bell curve is class structure in American, intelligence and class structure in American life. And that paragraph you just read captures the essence of what Dick Herrnstein and I were trying to talk about. And that is that over the course of the 20th century, there was a gradual, almost invisible, but crucial change in the way that intelligence was linked with success.
The first group of people that comes to mind with this is the Jews. The Jews have the highest recorded IQs on the face of the earth, on the planet. We can say that IQ tests are culturally biased and things of that nature, but for the most part, the Jews have an average IQ of 115 points. I think that's it, 115, 119, somewhere in there. And the facts just bear this out. And I know the first thing you're gonna say is, well, the Warburgs had the banking, they have a history of dealing with banking, the Rothschilds, that's why the Jews are the wealthiest people. And if you think that you really haven't looked at the Jewish culture, you really haven't really studied the culture itself. Although Warburg was a Jew, although the Rothschild, and those people weren't really Jews in the first place. Rothschild's not even his real last name. Although he is a Jew, the Ashkenazic Jews pretty much they were poor with no economic support or wealth. These people came in and they were peddlers.
Jews were considered outsiders. They were regarded with a certain suspicion.
I remember being asked if we had horns by people who you would think would know better.
They were a tiny minority who embraced America.
Today you might be a poor man, but tomorrow you can become a rich man.
During the 19th century, millions of people came to America from all over the world. Many were not welcomed. The Irish and Chinese were routine targets of hostility. Africans brought against their will suffered brutality and unending hardship. Jews met with a mixed reception. Most Americans had never seen a Jew until they met a Jewish peddler.
It's a story that's told in many versions, but mine is, what is the difference between a bookkeeper in New York's Garment District and a U.S. Supreme Court justice? One generation.
But these first 19th century Jewish immigrants were fortunate in their timing. America was expanding, with new railroads and canals linking far-flung towns and markets together.
The Jew is the middleman, and he's bringing the material, kind of what I might call sort of quasi-luxuries, to the farm families and the loggers and the miners.
As Americans headed west, Jews went with them, outfitting the Western expansion, establishing communities in cities like Cincinnati, St. Louis, Chicago, Des Moines, San Francisco. Soon there would be Jewish Americans in nearly every state of the Union.
My grandfather first came and had a pack on his back. He got his pack from the Baltimore Bargain House, where for $40 you could get a pack. And you would walk, and then pretty soon, you know, you'd get enough money to buy a horse, and then things would get a little better, and you had a wagon, and then you could put more stuff on the wagon. My grandmother called them the rolling store man. What a beautiful phrase. And then soon, you know, they would open a store, and my family lived out this paradigm, as did many, many others.
I call it the Harvard Business School of German Jews, because for about 5 years, many of them peddled, and then they would stop and found a store. And the store often turned into other kinds of businesses. Now, my mother's family, the Lehmans, came from Bavaria, settled in Montgomery, Alabama, opened a store called Lehman Brothers, and ultimately took payment in cotton, and the Lehmans actually made their fortune for the next century in cotton.
Meyer Guggenheim came from Switzerland and made millions mining silver and lead. Levi Strauss, a Bavarian immigrant, made his first fortune outfitting the miners during the gold rush. Then took out a patent for making riveted denim pants and made another fortune selling blue jeans.
One of my favorite books on this subject is Black Rednecks by Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell really goes into the, you know, aspects of the Jewish culture as far as them being what they call a middleman culture or peddlers. That's why one of the things you've heard me say on this channel, as if I'm a broken record, is that despise not humble beginnings, the Bible verse I quote, because they started small. You know, I even played a video with Malcolm X on Black Economic Empowerment video I had, where Malcolm X was saying Woolworths didn't start as a major company. They started as a small 5 and dime. You know, the small beginning can snowball. And I want you guys to take heed to that. 50 cents adds up. You know, if you just take a penny and compound it or double it every day for 30 days, 31 days, I think, for a month, you will have over $1 million in 30 days. Whereas if somebody said, hey, would you rather me take a penny and give you double the value for 30 days, or would you rather me give you $100,000? The average Joe Blow will take the $100,000. Oh, well, I'll take the $100,000. He's like, there's no way the penny would catch up with that. And it won't look like it until you get to day 26, 27, then you'll start seeing the case. Now, on top of having the highest recorded IQs, the Ashkenazic Jews have a high business sense. Jews are the most gifted people when it comes to entrepreneurship, building wealth, and making money. Now, this is extremely important when we start looking at the Jews throughout history. You know, people will make excuses and say, well, they're most successful because of this, or they're most successful because of that, and that's why. But having the highest recorded IQ does kind of play into that. I'm sorry, if you have an IQ of 85 and the Jewish guy has an IQ of 115, that 30 points is a big jump. Now, you do have to be, and that's where Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, comes in, because he talks about being smart enough. Most of the people that win the Nobel Peace Prize have IQs that go range from anywhere from 115 on up to 199 or 200. Just as long as you're above 200, 115, 110, 115, you have to be smart enough. But then there is a level where it doesn't make a difference. Just like he talked about in that book, the NBA players. There are people that are 7 feet tall, but it's not like, okay, I'm 6'10", and this guy's 7 feet, so this guy has a better shot because he's 7 feet and I'm 6'10". No, it comes a certain level of skill, emotional intelligence, and things of that nature once you get to that level. But you do have to be tall enough, and you do have to be intelligent enough, which seems to be the cutoff for the Nobel Peace Prize is 110 points. Not to say that if you have an IQ of 85 or 90 that you can't be successful. 18% of Jewish households have a net worth of $1 million or more. That means they have almost 1 in 5 of the Jews that you see on the street, their family is pretty much millionaires. Just think of that, their household. More than 55% of all Jews receive a college degree, and 25% a graduate degree. Now, contrast that with 18% of black people, African Americans, have bachelor's degrees, just bachelor's alone. 55 to 18. You see, and these are when you're talking about these degrees, these are some of the most sought after fields that we're talking about. Pretty much Jews are the most productive people on earth. I mean, they don't even need natural resources to flourish economically. Their cleverness is enough to prosper, pretty much. But in the black community, almost half of the black children in the 4th grade aren't reading at a basic skills level. Nationwide, black students have the lowest high school graduation rate and are among the lowest to graduate from high school as far as a rate.
Despite the fact that Jews make up no more than 2 to 3% of the American population, they make up 50% of the top 200 intellectuals, 40% of the Nobel Prize winners in science and economics, 20% of the professors at the top universities, 40% of the partners in the top New York and DC law firms, 59% of the writers, directors, and producers of the 50 top grossing movies, 37% of the winners of the National Medal of Science, and 50% of the world chess champions.
Of course, we as black people, we always blame poverty, racism, slavery, and most important, bad public schools to explain the failure of black students. I mean, that's just a fact. One of the problems to that, or one of the anomalies to that issue, are Asians, man. They don't fit the equation. They don't.
What really screws up a lot of the left's arguments are Asians. If you argue that the teaching methods in our schools today are too Eurocentric for black kids, what explains how well Asians do? I mean, if you argue that black kids are being kicked out of or suspended from school for bullying due to racism, what explains the fact that white kids are suspended more than the Asian kids?
You made the comment about, education, no child left behind, and the problem schools. Well, I happen to be an education major, and it is my personal belief that there really is no such thing as a problem school. I mean, yes, many schools are underfunded, and yes, inner city schools have trouble retaining qualified, experienced teachers because they would rather teach in the suburbs. One of the classes I had to take was called Multiculturalism in the Classroom. And there was a graph about the educational success of different minorities. And the African American community in very low numbers, graduates high school and goes on to college in proportion to the rest of the country. Now, what I noticed right off was this very same graph did not show the Asian community. And this is a community, I see you laughing, this is a community that highly values education. They also value respect. You don't talk back to your teacher. You do your homework and you study. And there are a great many Asians that I've known personally where the father speaks very little English, has a blue-collar job. The mother speaks no English at all. But those children, first-generation Americans, okay, their parents were born in another country and they came over here. Those children will go on to become doctors, lawyers, head of business. And yet, I'm being told in this class that the reason the African-American community doesn't go to college in bigger numbers is because of the slavery issue and all these things were 200 years ago, and they start talking about Ebonics. And to me, there seems to be a dichotomy there.
Everything you said about the Asian students are pretty much true statistically. I mean, not every Asian student is a brilliant student, but boy, the proportions are high, and also the speed with which they have assimilated. The story about the parent who speaks hardly any English and the kid is valedictorian, that happens all the time.
And, you know, meanwhile, when we allow Asian students in black schools, they still excel. That's a problem. That is a problem. Because think about it. When Asians go to the same school as black students, they still achieve. So then you have to say, okay, it's not about funding. It's not about anything. Racism, I hate to say it, is not. And I believe that there is a such thing as racism, but this isn't. This is just downright African American failure. Okay? We fail when it comes to academics. Why? Because Asian students, they go to school and they take this shit serious. Excuse my French. They take it serious. They go to school. Their parents, they're very disciplined. You know, I hate to allude to this book again, Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers. He talks about how cultures that raise or grow rice tend to be very gifted in mathematics, because what happens is when you grow rice, you have to be very patient. It takes years for the rice to grow, so you have to be very patient. It takes a lot of hard work, which translates very easily culturally into understanding math equations. Because guess what? You could do a calculus equation, it could be off or whatever, but people that have had a culture of, you know, being rice farmers, not just Asians, are very great. They excel at math. So this whole myth of, you know, that's one of the biggest things I have a problem with, is when I see black people bitching about the education system, more so than, look, when I play, and I'm going to say this analogy again, when I play basketball, I put 4 hours in, 3-4 hours a day in playing basketball. I would go to school, get out at 3 o'clock, and be at the gym till 8 o'clock every night. Every night I would walk home, 2-3 miles, walk or jog. And then on top of that, after school, I would work out for about 45 minutes or an hour lifting weights. Jog to the gym, play basketball till 8 o'clock at night till they lock the gym up, and jog home. Then I would do homework for 30 minutes and go to sleep. But that was me.
Through an interpreter, this South Philadelphia high school student says he was badly beaten and bruised when a gang of black students attacked him yesterday. Asian community leaders say as many as 30 students were targeted over a 2-day period.
The attackers were allowed to run in the hallways during class time. They were searching class by class, looking for the Asian students they were looking for.
School district officials say there were fights, but that's all they were, just fights. John Chen, executive director of the Chinatown Development Corporation, says out of 70 Asian students, only a fraction showed up for school today.
Only 10 students showed up for school today because all the kids are terrified to be in that school at this point in time.
They told police why they refused to go back to South Philadelphia High School.
We are afraid to get attacked after school and inside school, in the bathroom, around the school, around the hallway in school.
Investigators say 30 Asian American students at South Philadelphia High were assaulted last week by a group of African American students, 10 of whom they say have been suspended and sent to alternative schools. This week, as many as 50 students are boycotting classes because they claim the Philadelphia school district isn't taking the case seriously.
So this is bringing us back to the video that I did yesterday or the other day or whenever I put this up, because I might not put this up tonight. But anyway, this brings us back to two keywords: productivity, human capital. Productivity, human capital. Productive, why? Producing, the Asian students are much more productive. And this translates in life. It just does. Thereby increasing their human capital, and thereby they pretty much run the black community. When they come to a black community, they run circles around us. Look, Asian unemployment rate is actually 4% lower than the white unemployment rate right now. 4% lower. Asians are. That means they actually got a better unemployment rate than white people do. You know, the last time we had a better unemployment rate than whites, it was during the 1930s under segregation and Jim Crow. We actually had a lower unemployment rate than white people. Also, Asians have the highest business ownership rate in the country, which I'm not surprised there.
Now, what's going to happen now, what these think tanks decide to do in the contract with America, they found out through their research that approximately 68 to 7% of all the blacks in America work in some level of government. This happened as a direct result of the civil rights movement. See, at the end of the civil rights movement, instead of moving against the problem to get more wealth and power for black folk, our civil rights organizations pushed us over and looking for jobs. And so all of our black folk, then over 50 to 60% of all the blacks that got jobs after the civil rights movement went into government. So 68 to 70% of all the blacks in America are working either in federal government, city government, state government, county government, libraries, and school systems. So when you hear white folks talking about downsizing government, what they're talking about are de-employing and disemploying black folk. Now, I just told you that 68 to 70% of all the black folk are working in government. 26 to 28% of the rest of the blacks are working in white corporations. And those white corporations are going to follow the government. They're going to downsize. You're going to see IBM cutting back, Apple Computers, and Meritech, Lucent Tech, now all of them going to cut back. Only 2% of the blacks in America work in their own stores and their own business in their own communities. Only 2% that are not vulnerable. Only 2% of blacks are not vulnerable. The rest are vulnerable in America.
So the black community has a $1.2 trillion black-owned, what is it? I guess, I don't know, spending power. But we only account for revenue of $159 billion. So pretty much we got $1 trillion that's flowing out of our community. So quite frankly, I mean, this just stresses the importance of investing in highly intelligent individuals. You know, this is exactly what the European countries did at the end of World War II in order to get out of poverty quickly. They invested in highly educated people, whereas in the black community, we don't do that. I mean, thanks to the high levels of human capital, Europeans rebuilt their economies throughout, you know, Europe with knowledge transfer and technology transfers, pretty much. It was called the Marshall Plan. Check this out.
Every major industry in Europe was bankrupt, including steel, coal, and cement, and especially the agrarian companies were hit the hardest. All were bankrupt, and because of American tariffs, the European markets were unable to compete. At the same time, one man was trying to help, Secretary of State George C. Marshall. He was the spokesman for a group of brilliant economists, financiers, and investment bankers trying to come up with a plan to save Europe, the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was first implemented in the United Kingdom. The American government dispatched a committee to the United Kingdom to oversee the distribution of the Marshall Funds and the integration of American technology in the European industries. With the success in the United Kingdom, the Marshall Funds were transferred to France, Belgium, Holland, and the Scandinavian countries. The Technical Assistance Program, which allowed over 3,000 Europeans to make 6-month visits to various U.S. industries to learn new techniques. There was also a similar program in agriculture.
Not every country can do this. I mean, there are countries like Nigeria where they have to bring in highly qualified Chinese engineers because they can't build the infrastructure by themselves, which is just terrible.
A Chinese firm carrying out the construction of Nigeria's first standard gauge railway line has started training for local railway personnel to prepare them for the operation of the rail as the project nears completion. The 186.5 kilometers rail will link the capital Abuja to the north-central state of Kaduna. Xia Lijun, a project manager with the China Railway Construction Corporation, says the training covers more than 100 personnel of the Nigeria Railway Corporation.
For the construction itself, the track, the stations is almost complete. As what you can see just now, we are starting the operation training.
It impacts on agriculture and the economy, as agricultural produce are conveyed from Kaduna to Abuja at much cheaper rates.
A number of rail projects like this are underway across the country in an attempt to inject life into an economy facing recession and diversify Nigeria's economy from one almost solely reliant on oil.
I mean, they don't have the human capital, which in turn means they can't provide the productivity they needed to reach critical mass to basically raise the nation out of its poverty. And on top of that, you got the corruption, disorganization, ethnic conflicts, bad governance. Most of the countries like Nigeria suffer from a brain drain, meaning whenever a person gets some education, they're getting the hell up out of there. Kind of like my city where I'm from, Montgomery, Alabama. They have a brain drain. Most of the best and brightest black people I know that go to Tuskegee, Alabama State, as soon as they get their education, they're getting the hell up out of Montgomery because there aren't jobs for a lot of African Americans. Now, if you're white, it's different. If you're from Auburn University, you can come back to Montgomery and get a nice career going. Beautiful University of Alabama. But if you're from Tuskegee, Alabama State, you're probably going to come to Atlanta, Birmingham, a major city, where black people can get jobs. Because in cities like Montgomery, it's just not enough. Unless, of course, you got an IT career, then it might be a little different. But outside of that, most of the time you have to go to a major city. And I hate to admit it, I mean, because of the problems that Africa has with losing its best and brightest, some people have been quite, stark in regarding the future of Africa. I mean, they just have. Check this out.
Watson is one of the co-discoverers of DNA. In fact, he was one of the people who discovered DNA structure, and of course that is a very important foundation of the scientific field. Well, recently he made it known to everyone that he will be auctioning off his Nobel Prize because he is broke. Now, why is he broke? What happened? Why is he auctioning off this very, very important prize? Well, it turns out that in the past, he made a few racist comments about black people, and now people refuse to hire him as a result. Let me give you the specific examples according to Raw's story. In a 2007 interview with the Sunday Times, Watson claimed that he was inherently gloomy about the prospect of Africa because, quote, all our social policies are based on the fact that their intelligence is the same as ours, whereas all the testing says not really. He apologized for his remarks, saying that he was not a racist in a conventional way, and that the journalist interviewing him somehow wrote that I'm worried about people in Africa because of their low IQ, and you're not supposed to say that.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If I heard that, I would think it's racist too. But you have to ask yourself a question. I mean, we have to be honest. When a person's 400 pounds and they're walking around with some tight pants on and they look like a sack of potatoes with all the cellulite or whatever, and then you ask them, am I too fat? Am I out of shape? Now, you can choose to lie to that person, but it's not going to help them. A lot of times it's best that that person hears the truth. Now, now that's your woman, say that at your own risk. But what I'm saying is, for the most part, people have to be careful in how they address certain things. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an issue with intelligence and brain drain and productivity and human capital. And it shows with a lot of African or poor undeveloped countries that haven't, been ran, that not just African, but, Latin America, even certain parts of Europe. It's the same for parts of Europe. Certain parts of Europe are run down and raggedy because they lack human capital. So, that's just it. So, James Watson, the biologist, made a point that I can understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, it's only human nature that when people do that, they think they're better and superior to people. So that part I can't rock with, because I do believe that intelligence or IQ can actually be changed within reason. I do believe that. They say certain studies say you can't, certain studies say you can. But nonetheless, whatever your IQ is, it actually is more important to manage your EQ, which is your emotional intelligence. But I've already spoke on that, and I'll probably do that in another video. But back to this video. Okay, now here comes the, I don't even know what to call them, but just check this out. I mean, this is one of the points. This is what I'm getting at right here. Check this out.
People didn't do that. Rich people pass down generational wealth. Look,
even Bill Gates, even Bill Gates, when you look at that, like they done sold us like they make Bill Gates sound like he came from Compton or Zuckerberg. Dude, folks, his daddy was one of the top trademark attorneys in Seattle. You put that with his computer thing, he was ahead of the game.
Most black people are poor or in the working class. Like, that's poverty. This is what happens when you don't have any inheritance. You don't have any inheritance. We don't have good schools. There was a study recently that showed most black people, the majority of the black community go to failing schools. Okay? We don't have any inheritance. We have failing schools. There are no jobs. That means that we're a part of a permanent underclass.
Okay. Now, this is the thing. You've heard me talk about getting life insurance on my channel. But, inheritance has never been a reason why some people become rich and why some people are poor. It's just not. If you don't, this is the thing. Yeah, at a minimum, we should get life insurance. But I know people, for example, I knew a person in Montgomery that received $350,000. Their parents died in a car accident. They received $350,000, $400,000, almost $400,000 insurance. Only child, right? And he went and bought a Crown Vic, put some 22-inch rims on it, got a brand new paint job, got the engine chromed out, got the interior done, put in speakers and all that in the car. That Crown Vic was probably net. He probably spent $15,000. Now he has the money, some of the money left over. He did last I checked. But the thing is, he spent $15,000 on a damn Crown Vic, and with Alabama football stickers on the car, like he did all that. But what I'm saying is that, and you can look at this throughout history. A lot of the people that win the lottery, they wind up broke. I've seen black people. I know another guy. He was in a car accident and received $130,000 because his airbags didn't deploy. Well, when his airbags didn't deploy, he received, I think, $130,000 and he made he went and bought a brand new Lexus coupe for like, I don't know how much. Then this was back when the Lexus coupe was the car. Let's tell you how long ago that was. But he bought a Lexus coupe. He bought a house out in the east side of Montgomery, and he went back to work at Reams. $130,000. So I'm sorry. There are a lot of people that just aren't really intelligent with their money. And there are principles that go with money, rules. And if you are, and look, if I give you, if you give a person $100 million and that person's stupid or that person doesn't understand and they think that they're supposed to be wealthy, or they think they're set for life because they got $100 million, you set pretty good if you set it up right. But if you spend $100 million, you're not set for life. You might be set for 4 or 5 years, but you're not set for life. Check this out.
David Lebailly is a gossip reporter with the epitome of superficial journalism in Europe, the Paris Match. He has to stay here as the chronicler of this tragicomedy. It all revolves around France's wealthiest woman, 87-year-old Liliane Bettencourt, the heiress of what some call the most famous cosmetics company in the world. Yes, the one with the hairspray. Liliane's daughter, Françoise Bettencourt-Myers, thinks her mother no longer has all her marbles, and that this man is the reason. Françoise Marie Bagnier, the good friend of Madame L'Oréal. Liliane Bettencourt is supposed to have given this painter and photographer and bon vivant 1 billion of her 17 billion euros over the last few years. The daughter thinks the aging gigolo is taking advantage of her mother, and she's suing him. He demonstratively says he doesn't care, but things aren't so simple.
The point of the whole story is whether an older lady of 87 can indeed conduct her own business anymore. And it's about her whole entourage, who profit from her age and generosity to make so much money.
Toffs rely on primogeniture, inheritance by the firstborn son. But from time to time, the lottery of DNA has played havoc with the ideal of seamless transition. Casualties we have come across in this series include Jamie Blandford, heir to the largest palace in Britain. He crumpled at the prospect of his inheritance, took to crack, aged just 25, and has only just got clean. Then there's Anthony Ashley Cooper, 10th Earl of Shaftesbury. He couldn't turn round his crumbling Dorset estate and took to drink. He fled to France, fell prey to an escort, Jamila Mbarak. A year later, the hapless Earl's body was discovered in a remote alpine ravine, murdered at his new wife's instruction.
As you can see, inheritance doesn't automatically translate to financial sustainability. It just doesn't. Because quite frankly, some people are meant to be poor, some people are meant to be rich. And I guess most black people share this strong liberal belief that the best way to reduce poverty in the black community is to help or assist the poorest person, which irks me, really does. We have a hard time understanding that poverty is something we will never get rid of. Didn't Jesus say, the poor you will have with you always? But that's what, whenever black people get together, whenever we vote monolithically, it's for the poor. We come to the table and say, hey, give me the crumbs, give me food stamps, give me welfare, give me Section 8, give me all these safety net programs. Because we've been poor so long, or we think we have a poor mentality even when we make 6 figures. We just do.
And you come out of a tradition of a people that said we love the least of these, the poor, the orphan, the widow, the fatherless, the motherless, and we acknowledge that anytime you talk about black folk in America, you're talking about a state of emergency, especially for black poor and working people.
Check out Dr. Claude. Check him out. Check out what he has to say about it. I'm sorry, Dr. Claude Anderson. Check him out.
Poverty is a horizontal issue. I keep telling some of my civil rights leaders, stay away from poverty. You cannot eradicate poverty. Poverty is a fixed, it's a given. You're always going to have poor people. You're always going to have poor people. You're always going to have poor people. And people, you're going to have poor Greeks, poor Indians, poor Lithuanians, poor Hungarians. Quit trying to eradicate poverty and trying to get as many black folk as you out and leave poverty alone. But they try to eradicate something that can't be eradicated.
Thank you. Solving the problem, you know, as I said earlier, solving poverty is fundamentally just stupid because it always will exist on the wealthiest, even in the wealthiest countries on earth. It just will. Name a country that doesn't have poor, dysfunctional people. Name it. Every country, even China, well, we know China does, but even Japan, who I was talking about in the other video from yesterday, and one of my brothers mentioned Singapore, all these wealthy countries. They have poor people in those countries too. Everybody's not doing well. So trying to focus on that instead of focusing on the best and brightest is just a strategy for destruction, quite frankly. And that's why the black community is stuck where we are in mediocrity. Let's look at the white people. Let's look at the white people, the what we call the poor white people, unproductive white people that depend on wealth. Let's see what happens when you give them money.
Of money in the lottery, you have to be lucky. To keep your life in order after winning that money, you have to be skillful. This is David Lee Edwards.
I never have to worry about the hotel room again. Well, I have to pay for it. I never have to worry about that menu. Yeah, that's amazing.
Edwards and his then soon-to-be wife Shauna won 1/4 of a Powerball jackpot. They were presented with a $41 million check at this ceremony in Louisville, Kentucky in 2001 and received $27 million after taxes. Edwards had served time in prison and was unemployed. They got the Ferrari and many more cars and a Learjet and mansions. In 1 year, Edwards said he spent $12 million. He ultimately lost all his money, filed for divorce from Shauna, and died in hospice care 2 years ago. His story is not unique.
Was this bad judgment, or what would you like to say?
It was bad judgment, bad choice.
Do you want to say a few words, Amanda?
The woman not commenting was Amanda Clayton, who won $1 million in the Michigan State Lottery. She got into legal trouble after continuing to collect welfare benefits. She had said she was entitled to welfare because she still needed help. 1 year after she won the lottery, Amanda Clayton was found dead in her home from a suspected drug overdose.
These are people with extremely low IQs, little brains, no education, and in my opinion, they're mentally retarded, people. And look at what happened. The first guy, this guy got $27 million and went and spent $12 million in 12 months. Look at what happened. Wound up dead, got a divorce, $27 million. He couldn't say, I'm gonna put this in the bank and live off the interest. Or a lot of times when they give you a choice. They give you a couple of choices. For every $1 million, they could give you $50,000 a year perpetually for 20 years. So 27 times 50, what's that? I don't know. 50,000, $1.3 million before taxes. He'd probably bring home after taxes every year for 20 years. If he'd have took that lottery money, he would have brought home, about $650, maybe, let's just say he brought home $700,000 a year. That way he could live comfortably for 20 years guaranteed. $700,000 a year. But no, he wanted to hold $27 million and went crazy with it. And then on top of that, you could take that $27 million if he had got it and went and put, that would have been a down payment on building a damn, he could build for cash. He could have went and built a damn apartment complex with I don't know how many hundreds of units, and raked in thousands of dollars a month off that for the rest of his life, and his grandkids could have been set. Ignorance. See what I'm saying? It's rules to money. There are rules to money, people. There just are. Look at the professional athletes. Look at even white athletes. A lot of those guys wind up broke too. They just do. Go see the ESPN documentary called Broke. They say 85% of them are broke within 5 years. Also, one thing you have to look at too, don't look at these people and shake your head and look down at them, because quite frankly, most of us live the same way. You may not make millions, but you may have 50, 40, whatever you make. You can't scrape together $1,000. Most of us can't. Let's just be honest. If we have $1,000 in the bank, we're lucky. Most of us. We don't have it because we live paycheck to paycheck. So we're the same. See, don't look at this and think, start looking at your own life and saying, am I doing what I'm supposed to do with the little things I have? In the Bible, Jesus told a parable called a parable of the talents. If you're familiar with it, basically, master left everybody some talents. One guy went and buried his, he got 1 talent. But the guy with 2 talents doubled it to 4. The guy with 5 talents doubled it to 10. And when the master came back after a while, he said, what have you done with it? And the guy said, well, I buried it. He was like, you wicked, lazy servant. You could at least put it in the bank where you could have drawn some interest. But they didn't even do that. So what I'm saying is the talents that you have talents, not necessarily skills or, even though I am talking about skills and not skills, but human capital, I'm also talking about, what do you have at your disposal as African Americans? I'm going to end this video. That was it. I just wanted to put this out. I'll finish this video off, but I'm just going through these, trying to just point some things out and have us think properly and have basically be sober minded when it comes to how we look at our money and our wealth in the Black community. Thank you.